All right, hello again. So in this video, we're going to go over background images. And then while we're talking about background images, we'll talk a little bit about exporting, cropping images. We'll do a little bit with classes, box sizing, which is some CSS. This is CSS classes. I'll put CSS there, so you don't think we're talking about our class. Background images, of course, and how to position it a little bit. The background shorthand property. A little bit of floats, a little bit more about floats, containing floats, and a little bit of Flexbox. So kind of a lot of stuff. A lot of this we're going to talk about more later and more in depth. We're just going to use it for this video to get a background image up here in the top of our template. That's all we're doing. It sounds like a lot of work for something small, but it'll give us a chance to talk about some more stuff. So, okay, so we're going to start with our simple template that hopefully you have, or I'll give it to you, or you did it already. It depends what semester and how you're looking at this and what sort of situation we're in. But it looks like this. So it's just a page, right, with a header, a navigation bar, a content area, and a footer. So we're gonna add a background image up here in the top. So first thing we're gonna do is look at stock photography. So stock photography are photographs that have already been taken that you can use for designs, right? So there's free stock photography and there's paid stock photography. It's kind of a big subject, so we won't get too far into it. But the short answer is, if you're doing a real website, you can't just use anybody's image. You can, I mean, it works. You can't go on Google or somewhere and find an image and put it on your website. You probably are in copyright violation because you kind of just stole an image from some other place and put it up. Now there's a lot of gray area there. We can do whatever we want in the class, actually, because of fair use, theoretically. But yeah, so what we're gonna do is look for a free stock photo and use that for our pretend web page. Well, it's not a pretend web page, it's real. So I went to one called Pixabay. Pixabay may be out of business by the time you see this video. There's a lot of sites where you can download stock photography. And again, stock photography are just images that have already been shot that you can buy paid ones and you can get free ones. But again, it's a big subject. So I'm just gonna look at Milky Way, and you guys can look up the same thing. And then you get pictures of the Milky Way, which, if you didn't know, is the galaxy where you live. Unless you guys are watching this on your aliens watching from space, and you're like, we don't live in the Milky Way. But most people watching the video probably are. So I'm going to use this one because I've already used this one, I think. So I'm going to click on that. And then it may look different for you because if you've never used Pixabay, it may ask you to log in or join or something like that. So you'll have to deal with that. But I'm going to click on download, and I'm going to get the image that is 1920 by 1079. Those are pixel-based units, right? So pixels are the little dots. They stands for picture elements, actually. They're the little dots that make up the image. They're not dots, they're squares. But when you get an image that you want to use, you want to make sure it's bigger than you actually need, but not smaller usually. But you don't necessarily want to get the biggest one you can get, because when you resize it, they can lose quality. So I know that I'm going to use this as a header image, which is going to be smaller than this. So I don't need the giant one, this one. So I'm going to click download, and it downloads, and I'll find it here. And it is called Milky Way and a bunch of numbers, 1920. So I can drag that, I think, directly from here. And I didn't mention that here's my template file. I have a JS folder for JavaScript. You may have seen this before in a different video. An IMG folder for I am Mark Garrett. No, it's image. That's what it stands for, not I am Mark Garrett. And then there's a CSS folder. So I'm going to just drag that directly from my computer into the image folder. I think that works here. Yeah, there we go. So I just moved that. And now if I go to my actual folder, let me see if I right click and go to Reveal in Finder, then here is my folder with my files, and you can see it's the same thing, right? So here is the file we're working with. Here is the Milky Way image inside of this image folder, and there's nothing in the CSS and JavaScript in this case, but they could be there. We're not really using them, but they could be there. So yeah, so why do we care about that? Because this path, just like in the links, which I think you've seen a video on links, right? We have to make sure we know the path to this image to get it to show up. So where is it? It's in the image folder, or IMG folder, which has my initials in it. Okay, I think that's good on that. So now that we've got that image, you can actually click on it in VS Code and see it. But we don't really need to do with it anything right there in VS Code. So now we're going to crop it in Photoshop. You could do this in other applications. I opened it in Photopea earlier before the video here to make sure it would work in there. So you get the crop tool and then you put in the size you want up here, and there it would work. But we're not going to use Photopea. We're going to use Photoshop since that's more of a standard thing. But in a pinch, you could use Photopea. And like I said, I don't know if Photopea will be here by the time you see this video either, because they kind of steal everything from Adobe. But anyway, I digress. So let's go open this in, let me find this again in my Finder. And then I'm going to right click on this and say open with Photoshop. I'm actually using a Photoshop beta for some bad reason. And there it is right there. So we want it to be, I'm going to keep going back to these notes for you guys. We want it to be 1320 by 300. If you remember, you probably don't, that we made this thing a max width of 1320. If I right click here and inspect it, remember you can always inspect things and see what's going on. I put the wrapper as a max width of 1320. So we want it to fill up that whole space, so it needs to be 1320. It doesn't have to be bigger because it would just be a waste to make it bigger. So you always want to make your images as small as possible. That's called optimizing, which we'll talk more about and probably in a different video. All right, so I'm going to go to, I'm here in Photoshop. I'm going to go to the crop tool, which is the 5th one down at this point in history. And it's right there. It looks like a crop tool. That doesn't really help, does it? It looks like a couple of corners to a rectangle. And then up here in the top, I'm going to put, there's a lot of things you can pick from. I'm going to do width times height times resolution. And then, oh, I already did it, so it remembered that. But you guys will have to type that in probably. So I went up here and I typed, that is so small. I typed in 1320 px. So remember it says width times height times resolution. 1320 px, that's pixels, by 300. That's the width, that's the height, width times height. And then this resolution, it's kind of a trick question. What should it be? It doesn't really matter. If you're printing it, it matters. If you're not printing it, it doesn't really matter. 72 used to be what people would say to put things on the web, but it doesn't matter because every pixel on, most of the time it doesn't matter, let's say. Every pixel on screen is going to be a pixel in the image. This is more relevant for printing. Let's leave that there because we could go into a half hour of not riveting stuff about that. All right, so once I get that in, I can drag this guy around, and you probably will have to, I already did it, right? So I'm just going to drag this so it fits the full width here, and then I'm going to pick the part of this image I want. I'll just pick the middle, I guess. Well, maybe I'll pick down here so it's kind of got some darker in the middle, and we're going to put some text right here on our web page. So I'm actually going to pick this part of it. You guys can pick a different image, by the way, or you can pick this same one if you can find it. It may not be there. It probably won't be there, but maybe. And then once I get what I want selected there, and I can drag this out from the sides, I can drag in the middle to move my actual image around, but what's going to get cropped, the final image is going to be this, whatever's in this, this rectangle, right? So to crop, I make sure I have my settings right. Make sure you have pixels in there. You don't want inches or anything. And then I hit enter. And it's cropped. So we just cut out a bunch of that image. You can see right here in Photoshop, has a little asterisk next to the name of the file. That means that it's not saved. I don't want to save it like this because I would lose my original. So I'm going to do a save as here in a second. I just wanted to verify. And I can zoom in here with Command plus or minus. So I'm using Command plus and minus. You'll see more Photoshop as we go along. And then I can use my Option key or Alt key and use my scroll wheel to zoom. But what I really want to do is go up to Image and Image Size and click on that. And I want to check my image size. So I am at 1320 by 300. So I'm going to click cancel on that because that's the size I wanted. Now I'm going to go to File and Export. There's a lot of ways to do this in Photoshop. You'll probably see it in a different image. There's Save As, there's Export, there's other ways to do it. I'm going to do Export As because I want to show you the Export As. And you may have seen this already. I'm sorry if you have already. It tells me the size right here, 1320 by 300. And format PNG. I don't think this needs to be a PNG. I think this needs to be a JPEG because it'll be smaller. And then I'm going to, oh, can you guys hear that? It's a car alarm. Somebody's stealing my car. Hope not. I hope not. So it says JPEG quality, and I'm going to put it at 4, which is probably fine for this one. And again, we'll get into this a little bit more, I think, in a different video, but I don't want to spend all day on this part. And so that's 1320 by 300. That's the size. That's correct. We already cropped to the right size we needed. But if we didn't, we could have done it here. But again, we already did it, so we don't have to worry about that. The rest of this you can leave the same. You don't have to do anything. So I'm going to click Export. And it's going to ask me what I want to do with it. I'm going to call it Milky Way. And I'll put the size in it, which is a good thing to do because then I know it's 1320 by 300. Now I've got to find my folder. Yeah, so here is my original. Here's the new one, Milky-Way-13 by 20 .jpg. Make sure you can see your extensions. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but you probably want to turn on extensions visibility on your computer, your Mac or PC or whatever supercomputer you're using, so you know what kind of file it is. That's a setting that you can look up how to do that if you don't have it turned on already, but you want to know what the extension is. And if you have the visibility turned off, sometimes you'll have 2 extensions and then the file name is wrong and all kinds of terrible things happen. Bad things happen to the Milky Way. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to click Save. And nothing happened. Well, actually, it did happen. If I go back to my folder, oh, look at that. There's the 13 by 20. There's the right size one. That's the one that's 1320 by 300. That's the one we're going to add to our web page. All right, so we've got that image. Now we're going to put that on our actual page. So we're kind of, I'm going to hide this because we're kind of done with the Photoshop for this one already. So now the rest is just some coding, right? The fun coding stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and add a few things to the HTML. So this again is that template page that you probably did earlier. If you didn't, I'll probably get it to you some way or a video, an image of it or something. But you do need this file to start with. It looks like this, of course. I just said that a minute ago. All right, so we've got our wrapper. So in the header, we're going to add a little bit of code in here. Let me make this a tiny bit bigger. And I'll hide the sidebar so we get a little more space. So I'm going to say header, and then I'm going to add what's called a class. So I'm going to say class. I don't think we've done classes yet, so I'll explain that in a second. I'm going to say class equals hero image underscore hero image. You could use a dash. You don't want to use anything else besides dashes or underscores in a class name, and for some reason you can't start with a number, but other than that it's pretty much up to you what you name it. So we're naming this class, or we're using this class. We haven't defined it yet. We'll do that up there, but we will be doing that. And then inside this H1 where it says a basic 1-column template, we're going to change this to say this is about images. I'll make it capital images. I don't know why. And then inside the H1, we're going to give it a class as well. Class equals, and we're going to say hero underscore text. So when you hear the term hero image, and a hero image is kind of an image that is usually large and kind of featured and supposed to draw the viewer in and be exciting and interesting. It's a hero. It's like Superman or anything starring Michael Keaton. No, he's not. Anyway, it's a hero image, right? So it's something to draw the viewer in. So it can be in the it can be in the header, it can be in the middle of the page. Sometimes you'll see a full page background image that can work as a hero. It's got a lot of variability to it, but generally that's it. So that's it. All we have to do to the HTML. Actually, the rest is going to be CSS. So I'm going to go back up to my styles. It should be around line 51 or so, something like that. And then I'm going to start defining these classes. So I was going to go quickly and talk to you about classes before we actually did this. Let me make this a little bigger. So we're talking about a type of selector, right? So these are called element selectors or HTML element selectors when you just see something that looks like a tag, right? This is called, and I think you've seen this before, but if you haven't, this is called an ID. An ID is something that you named. It's an identifier or identification. So this one's called wrapper. Remember we did that earlier, hopefully. And then the rest of these are just more combination selectors, which they just have a couple of elements in it. But now we're doing a class. It's a whole new thing. So if we look in the old, this is the version 5 of the book. I think you might see this when version 6 comes out, but we can click on go to ID and class selectors here just to see that. I think you already opened it actually. So an ID again starts with a pound sign or a hash mark. That is an ID, but a class starts with a dot or period. So people say dot price or whatever. The difference between a class and I lost it here. The difference between a class and an ID is IDs can only be used once, and a class can be used. I can't find it. Oh, here it is. Classes can be used to classify elements into a group. Unlike an ID, multiple elements may share the same class name, and you can apply more than one class to something. So if you want to reuse a style, it's kind of like Word, Microsoft Word, where you maybe you have some text styles that you like, a certain size text and color and stuff like that. You can save that as a style, same thing, right? And then you can apply it to multiple things. So that's kind of what a class is like. I call it a free agent selector. You can apply it to different things. How do you apply it? You say class equals whatever the name of the class is. An ID, you remember it works like this. ID equals wrapper. This is a class. Class equals hero image. I could use this class more than once. I can't use that one more than once. Okay, hopefully that's clear. All right. So next we're going to add some classes here. So let's go in and say dot hero image. And then we put our curly braces in, right? And then we're going to give that a height. So remember the hero image is on the header. That's what class it's on. So the header is this guy up here, right? Let me get this out of the way. All right, so hero image, and then we've got a height of 300. We're doing a specific height for this one, 300 pixels. And you can see what happened. This is now 300 pixels high. This header has that class on it, so everything we add to this class is going to apply to this header. I could use an ID actually for this too, but I used the class just to kind of try it out. So we're going to add padding of 0. That makes no space or no extra padding inside the header. And you can see that the heading now is up against the edge, which we will fix in a little bit. We're going to say box sizing border box. And the reason for that is that will make sure that anytime we say the height and the width of the box, which we are doing right now, the container, that is going to include the padding and any border. We don't have a border here, but if we added a padding, that would add on to this 300. But if we say box sizing border box, it won't. So you will see that in a different video later, and I don't want to spend all day on it, but basically it says like, if I give this box a height and a width, it includes the padding and any border. If I don't say box sizing border box, it does not include it. So you have to kind of add it on. Yeah, so we'll leave it at that, and I think you'll see that again. All right, so now we're getting into the fun stuff. We're gonna say background color, and we're gonna do just a gray, just to see what happens. Okay, so we gave it a gray background. That's pretty ugly, but this is just temporary. Now we're gonna do the fun stuff. We're gonna say background image. Ooh, background image. And then I type URL, and you can see it's right there. I'm using my arrow key again to go to these different options. And then you'll get parentheses there, regular old parentheses, not the curly ones. And that's where I put my image. So I'm gonna start with IMG. As soon as I start with the I, right, it goes, oh, there's a folder called IMG in there. I'm gonna click on it. I could have just hit return. And there's my image. Look at that. It works already. Did you guys see that? You didn't even see that. So now we have a background image in that that hero image container, that header. That's a container, right? The header is a container. It's a block element too. I forgot to say that, right? It has its own rectangular container. So I say background image, and then that's the image. I could type all that myself, but it's slower. So why do that? So I'm going to say background. Now I'm going to say background repeat. You can see there's a lot of things for background, and there is other or are other videos about background images that you'll see later that are maybe optional. You'll see. So I'm going to say background repeat, and I'm going to say no repeat. It's no dash repeat. What does that mean? Background images by default repeat, meaning they tile, they fill up the container. That doesn't apply in our case because our background image is bigger than our container, but if it wasn't, it would just repeat and you'd see it kind of like 10 times. Yeah, you can see that in a different video. And actually because of that, I don't really need this background repeat, but I wanted to throw it in here because our image is too big to repeat. So, but anyway, I put it in there. Now we're gonna do background position, and I'm gonna say center and top. And it's centered horizontally and it's at the top. So what does that mean? Now when I move, you see how it's the center of the image stays in the center of my header. That's all that really did. It was already at the top, so that really didn't do anything. There's a lot of ways to position images as well. That's in a separate video as well. You'll see that later. So I have background, color, image, repeat, and position. I wanted to do it separately like that just to show you that you could do it that way. You can also do it with what's called a shorthand property. I'm going to say just background without anything else. Now I can do this all at once. So the way background works is I put the color in first, then I put the image, and I'm going to copy so I don't make a mistake. Then I put the repeat if I want no repeat. And there is an order to this, and I'll try to give you guys a little cheat sheet on that. I say no repeat, and then I'm going to do center and top. That's the position. So it kind of needs to be in that order. Supposedly, it might work anyway, but I'm going to do it that way. So that is the way to do it with one line of CSS instead of 4. Same result. So I can actually select all that, and remember to comment something out. I can do Command or Control /, or I could type this in, right? It's /* and then */ or asterisk / if you want to say that. Say it the cool way. So now that means that's commented out. This is no longer doing anything, and you can see our background still works. So most of the time, you're probably going to see backgrounds like this instead of with 4 separate lines. And there's more stuff you can put in a background too, more background properties, lots of them. But for now, yeah. So we have the color. The color is kind of a backup, and also it will show up before the image shows up. So actually, I should probably change this to more of a blue. Something that looks like that star field. Yeah, so I just selected a new color. So if for some reason that image was slow to download, or It was somebody had images turned off, which I've heard of. There's people like that supposedly. Then they would see this color instead. So at least it's kind of okay. All right. That is good for that. We're going to come back to that one just in a second. Now we got to style the text. So I'm going to say dot hero underscore text. Whoops, I spelled it wrong. Dot her text. She doesn't want that text. Hero text, right? So I have to make sure that this is spelled exactly the same, just like an ID. And you can see that when I select it, it selects it also up there, which is kind of cool. Okay, so there's hero text, right? And we're gonna go give it a color. We're gonna say color white, which is FFFFFF. Hopefully you knew that already. So now the text is white, right? And then we're gonna change the font size. I'm gonna say font size 3 rem. And rem is relative EM units. And what that means is it's gonna be about 3 times the normal size of text. And the R part means that it is going to not calculate values based on existing values. I don't know, what does that mean? I'll probably refer you to the book on that because it gets a little complicated, but it's a way to make sure that it's gonna be the same size all the time, no matter what else is going on as far as sizing of text. You may have already seen it, I think, in the second video, maybe you have. All right, the last 2 things we want to do is center this text horizontally and vertically. So I'm just going to add text align center to this text here. So I'm going to say text align center. And now that text is centered, right? So that's good. And then I want to center this vertically. That is not as easy to do, unfortunately. So what we're going to do is use Flexbox for this. I don't know if you guys saw it. I had a little edit in there because I figured out something that I could do in a better fashion for you guys. So we're not going to use any floats for this, but we are going to use Flexbox. So this is I think our first use of Flexbox. We are going to do quite a bit with Flexbox. You'll see a lot of resources on Flexbox. But what Flexbox is good for is lining things up next to each other and aligning things either vertically or horizontally, kind of in 2 dimensions. Rows or columns, basically. You can think of it that way. So what we're going to do is go back up to hero image here. So we've got hero image ends there, right? So we're going to turn that container, that's this container here, right? The header up there. We're going to turn that container into a what's called a flex container. All we have to do to do that is say display flex. And what happened? Well, you saw that some things changed, some margins changed. Let me comment that out for a second. So right now, if we look, there's a space above our header. That is because this heading, let me inspect it here. This heading has some, remember I can right click and inspect. This heading has some margin. There's the margin there. And that actually goes outside of the header. And it kind of makes that space. That's where that space is coming from. Since the heading and the header and the heading, that's hard to say, are block elements, they go all the way across the container that they're in. So they're in the web page, basically, the viewport, the body, or the wrapper, actually. They're in the wrapper. So they go all the way across. That's what block elements do. They go all the way across until they hit the edge and then they stop. When we turn this thing into a Flexbox container or a flex container, let me uncomment that. That's Command or Control /. Now this is, the header is a Flexbox container and it doesn't look much different. We lost the margin because we've changed it into a different kind of container. And if I look at the heading now, look at the heading. If I select it here in the DevTools in Chrome, I can't really roll my mouse over there to show you. But look over here when I roll over that. See, the heading does not go all the way across because what Flexbox does is it wants to stack things next to each other, horizontally and vertically, block elements. So it'll take every block element and put it next to each other. Instead of, normally they go vertically, right? We can change that. We can make it go vertically. We can change the spacing. You can do all kinds of things. It's a little bit tricky. I'm not going to lie. There's some strange things about Flexbox, but it is a very commonly used way to do layout. So we're not really using it to do like a row or a column of containers. We're using it to align here a little bit. There's other ways to do this. Like I just aligned the text with text align center. That was an easy way to do that. But I want to align this vertically, right? So, and you can see now that that's why this looks like it's not center aligned. It actually is, but the heading only goes to there. I know that's kind of complicated. But right now, by default, a flex container goes as a row. It goes this way. So we want it to go vertically. So we're going to say flex direction, and we're going to say column. So now it goes vertically, and it actually centers it because, why is it centering it? It's kind of an illusion. If I go here, well, yeah, it is. It's centering it that way horizontally, but it's already centered horizontally because now the block element goes all the way across is basically what I'm trying to say. So it's back to the way it was, and our text align center is working, so it's in the center of that. But we also want to center this vertically, which actually, like I said, is the tricky part. There's different ways to do this, but I'm using Flexbox just to kind of introduce you to Flexbox. So I'm going to say justify content, and I'm going to go center. So what that does is it says justify content is sort of alignment, right? Along what's the main axis of the Flexbox, which is vertically. You can align both directions too. You'll see that later, either way. But there's a bunch of options for justify content. If I delete that, you'll see there's a lot of them here. So if I say center, it's going to center it in the Flex container. This is the Flex container. This is the thing that's centered. If there was more than one, they would stack, but they'd be aligned to the middle. So really what Flexbox is really good at is aligning things and stacking them next to each other. But it does do some funky stuff, I'm not gonna lie. But in this case, it's fairly simple. If I select this again and inspect it, you can see that it's centered vertically, even though, yeah, it's centered vertically. So that's fine, actually. I did want to make sure that you guys saw that you should, and this is how I discovered my the way I was doing it before was probably maybe not the best way. I'm going to click on this guy here. Well, hopefully you've seen this before, but I'm going to toggle the device toolbar in the Chrome DevTools and just make sure that this looks okay in the mobile view. So this is the mobile view, and yeah, that heading looks fine. It's vertically centered and it's horizontally centered. That's a little bit high for a header in mobile because it's taking up a lot of the space. So I probably would make that shorter, but that would be a different video. So, yeah. So I think that is it for this one. Hopefully that helped out quite a bit. And I will talk to you again later.